Mitchell has his head up, takes the feet. Oh, my! Donovan! Get that weak stuff out of here!
I think it's very interesting because against the Bucks, that's a very drop-heavy team, and the Cavs have to play that a certain way. Against the Clippers, they're a switchy team. They have a lot of switchable defenders, and so I thought that was a really interesting dynamic, and I wanted to know from your perspective, how did the Cavs how did their approach to playing offense change in this game?
I think it was really interesting how they did it. Before the game, Ty Lue talked about how when you face somebody like Donovan Mitchell, you can't show them the same thing. So sometimes you're going to drop, sometimes you're going to switch, sometimes you're going to blitz. And I think you saw that throughout the game where the Clippers weren't really doing the same thing on back-to-back possessions with him. And he did a really good job, I thought, of getting the ball out early. He really did a good job of just kind of reacting and doing what the defense was giving up. And that's not something that he's done in the playoffs, especially last year against the Knicks. He wasn't accepting what the Knicks were trying to throw at him. He was trying to shoot over them. He was trying to run through the double teams. Or if he did pass it out, it was like way too late and the defense was already able to recover. So that's where I was just kind of really impressed with this. And this was a physical game where it was a lot of, especially like the fourth quarter, it was very like half court heavy. And I thought the Cavs, they weren't perfect, but it was a more perfect version of this team. It felt at the end of last year, you kind of saw teams that a game against the Sixers really sticks out. I don't know if you remember the one where Joel Embiid should have had his sixth foul, but then they reviewed it.
Oh, so, I remember.
Like the half court offense just completely fell apart in the final 5 minutes of that game. That just felt like, all right, when you were watching it, you were like, well, there was just a bad night. But then it kept happening, and then in the playoffs, it happened again. This game, it felt like this was okay. We've learned all of those lessons from that Knicks series, and we're going to start applying them here. And that's what I was most encouraged about with this game.
What defensive scheme do you think they are better equipped to take on right now, the drop or the switch? Because I think last year against the Knicks, their downfall was not being able to beat that drop coverage. Whereas this year, I think they've kind of addressed a lot of those weaknesses, whether it's just Allen's growth as a playmaker and being able to do stuff above the break. You have Max Strus who can come off a dribble handoff a lot better than Jetty or Okoro standing in the corner. Like last year in that Knicks series, they just kept running into the same issue over and over again. And their only option was either, okay, they had a couple options. It was either, okay, Mitchell just has to shoot over the drop and beat it, which he had unfortunately a pretty poor shooting series. Right. Mobley has to beat his defender by either taking that mid-range shot or trying to drive into the paint. We saw how that went. Or you pass it to Okoro in the corner or Jetty, and nothing was working.
Right.
This year, they have so many more options, whether it's Mitchell seemingly adjusting to what the defense is giving him rather than running his head into the wall over and over again. The Clippers game was such a good example of that. And even the Bucks games, both of those. And then also Dean Wade is shooting the lights out this year. Max Strus is a better shooter. Sam Merrill, who didn't get to play much in this Clippers game, I think would be better suited in a Knicks series maybe.
When you have guys like Donovan Mitchell, who I think can beat anybody off the dribble in a one-on-one situation, or at least you trust him to do that, I kind of like him in a switching situation more, where it's more spaced out and more, you're not
he has something to work with.
Much. Right.
He can manipulate the defense a little more rather than having that help defender just staying home. I feel like Mitchell, he was so good last night. We'll just transition to talk about Mitchell here. He was just so fun watching as a playmaker because every time the Clippers thought they had him, he was getting into the paint, kind of freezing the entire defense, and then it was just pick your poison. I mean, he was dropping dimes to Allen. He was kicking out to the three-point line. He's been so good at just the Cavs aren't playing at a reckless speed, but Mitchell has his foot over the gas pedal at all times, and he is getting them off to the races whenever an opportunity presents itself. That's where Wade has been so good, just firing in transition above the break. It's been really fun watching Mitchell just be on alert. Like this entire stretch, he's been so alert as a playmaker, and he's been making some really, really good passes that I think, just throughout his career up to this point, before this year, he had one game of 12 or more assists. He's already had 3 this season. And I think that really shows. Of course, he's playing point guard for a long stretch here,
Right.
but I think Mitchell has really just done such a great job of elevating his teammates in a way that we haven't really seen from him in the past.
Yeah, and I think when you talk about them playing with more pace or more speed, it's not like looking at the pace numbers. It's more so they're playing with a sense of urgency on that side of the ball that I don't think they were ever playing with last year, where they're really deliberate about what they're trying to do, and if they see an opening, they're going to attack it. I think you shared the clip online where
He's like
Mitchell threw it to Wade.
Yeah, he's like behind half court. The Clippers
Right.
defense is set up, and he just rifles a pass. I mean, Mitchell's throwing these passes before the Bally Sports camera can even cut to the player shooting the ball.
Which
sometimes
isn't saying much.
Yeah, I know. The Bally's cameraman has some work to do. Mitchell's putting the pressure on him.
Yes. Yeah. So, yeah, that's where I think this offense has really changed, because last year it just felt like so many times they were just walking it up the court and walking it into the actions that they were doing instead of getting into them quickly, because they're not like taking shots with 18 seconds on the shot clock every time. It's more so they're just maximizing their time.
Another question that I want to ask as far as DG's return goes, Cavs have been very, very good on defense. And really, aside from Niang and Merrill occasionally, they're putting out lineups that have like no weak points on the defensive end. I mean, you're putting out Mitchell, who's having a very good defensive season. Okoro, Wade, Allen, Strus has been very good. My question is, now that Garland is going to be out there, and I try to give him as much credit as I can for defense because he's just physically limited. I think he's a capable defender. It's just there's only so much he can do with his build. Right. What does that mean for the Cavs defense now that there is a weak point for teams to target?
What I don't want the Cavs to do is what they've done in the past, which is kind of overcompensate for Darius Garland. I think if Darius Garland's going to be your starting point guard, don't try to overcompensate where you hurt your defense in other areas by not trusting Darius Garland to do his job. We don't need all defense from Darius for this, team to work, but we do need him to compete on that end. And I think he can do that. And I think that's where you've seen Donovan really step up, because this isn't the defender that Donovan was last year. He's really stepped up in this stretch knowing that, hey, I have to compete on this end because I'm not going to have Evan Mobley there to just clean up all my messes. So that's what I want to see from Darius. And I more so hope that the team keeps the philosophies that have made them successful right now, because this defense wasn't very good at the start of the season. People forget that it was pretty mediocre for large stretches, and that's one of the reasons why they were 15 and 13, 13 and 12, whatever it was.
I think Garland is capable of fighting on the defensive end, and so it comes down to the defensive philosophy. It comes down to individual trust and accountability, because I do think they really are at their best when they kind of trust their point of attack defenders to a reasonable extent. Allen and Mobley still have to have the ability to get over and protect the rim, which is something that they're amazing at. But you can't do it at the cost of breaking down the rest of the defense when it's not really necessary, especially those in-between shots that we'll talk about it forever, probably in the next series. Like, you really didn't need to smother Brunson on those floaters. Those are the types of shots that the defense probably would rather give up more often than not. Best defenses in the NBA, you limit shots in the paint, and you do your best to run teams off the three-point line. The more shots you can force in that mid-range area, the better defense you're playing. We're definitely going to have to talk Cavs Knicks again. Sometimes it does seem like they're just on a collision course for this rematch, and I'm very interested to see.
I mean, in the Eastern Conference Finals.
Yeah, of course. I'm really interested to see if those two teams do face off again, how the Knicks choose to defend us. I'd assume they go back to that drop coverage because it was just so effective last year, but I think the Cavs can beat the drop this year. I feel confident in that compared to last year. And the Knicks, they can play switchable defense too. So that's something to really watch out for whenever. I don't know when their next regular season matchup is, but I would like to see how the Knicks choose to defend them. And if the Cavs are able to, because that's their kind of last year. Not only were they just had some weaknesses exploited, but they also just played well below what they were capable of. And so that's kind of that chip on their shoulder that I hope the Cavs and Knicks play again in the first round and they get an opportunity to kind of expel those demons.
I never want to talk about a Cavs Knicks matchup ever again in my life.